He knocked my mom out the top of the stairs. I could see him coming down the stairs, just dragging her. And she was kind of lifeless. And that's when I got off the couch, scared to death, jumped on my father, and he beat the shit out of me. We never went to school hardly at all because we were bruised up. He also believed in just us working the family business. So going to school really didn't happen for me at all. Not only did he take a backseat, I also had a learning disability. I'll never forget in third grade, there was this teacher that was extremely rough on me. And at this time in my life, I did not need this. And she believed I needed to be in a special school because of my learning disability. And this is where I was talking about, people always talk about manage your expectations. This teacher managed my expectations. She saw I had a learning disability. She saw I was socially unable to survive in this world. She saw I was messed up. So she managed my expectations. She said, we need to put David Goggins in a special school. I came from hell. And when you come from hell not knowing how to fight, this is what happens to you. What happens to you is you become a fucked up kid that cannot survive in society. I'll never forget one time during a basketball game, there was this coach, Mr. Trout. He knew me when I was a kid in that school when I was in third grade getting set back. Mr. Trout always loved me. This white man loved the shit out of me. I don't know why he did. But he was my JV basketball coach my sophomore year. The visiting team was at our home stadium. It was at the end of the game, and the visiting team started chanting. I was the only black person in the whole daggone stadium. They started chanting, nigger, nigger, nigger. That's all I remember. At that time in my life, that's all I remember. But now at 42 years old, I can look back on that time with clear eyes and a clear mind and see what Mr. Trout did for me. He went in that locker room where I was crying and upset, and he cried with me. This white man cried with me, but at that time in my life, I didn't see that. All I saw was red. I saw hate. This whole town hated me. Everybody's against me. My mind lost it. And for some reason, I couldn't sleep on my bed. Until this day, I don't know why the floor felt so comfortable. And at 22, 21 years old, I went from 175 pounds to 297 pounds. Fat, out of shape, insecure. I was everything everybody said I was going to be. That's what I was. And it makes you feel like shit. So I got a job spraying for cockroaches at nighttime. Not saying it's a bad job, but I didn't want to do it. So for about 6 months, I went around to your local eatery spraying for cockroaches. This one night I came home, the first thing I do, I walk in my living room, turn the TV on. First thing I do, and then walk back to to take a shower. And I would listen to the TV as I was trying to take a shower. This day changed my life. It held me accountable for what I wasn't facing in life. They're going through Navy SEAL training. And I sat down. I came out of the shower and I sat down. Something brought me back to sit down and watch these guys go through hell. I saw a ton of them quitting, ringing the bell. Ringing the bell means you quit Navy SEAL training. I saw them putting their helmet down. This went on through the whole show. And it finally got to the very end. There was about 15 to 20 guys at the very end. And this one statement changed my life. They were all sitting there in their dress whites. And this CO, this commanding officer, stands up in front of these men. And he looked sharp, and I could tell he stood for something. And he said, we live in a world where mediocrity is often rewarded. These men up here detest mediocrity. When you hear a statement like that, it forces you to think about yourself. I wasn't even fucking mediocre. I wasn't anything. I was at the bottom of the barrel of life. I chose the 4-lane highway for my life, the easy route, the route that has gas stations, the route that has fucking signs that say 20 miles to the next service stop. All this shit. I chose that route. Most of us choose the 4-lane highway. When I was born, there was also a shovel over here in the fucking corner. No one wants to go to the shovel. They want to choose the 4-lane fucking highway. That's the nice route. The shovel means you're gonna fucking hurt. The shovel means you're gonna suffer. The shovel means you're gonna hit rock. a lot of time. And we all know what digging through rock is like. When you hit a fucking root, you gotta fucking get some more tools out. If I had no more tools, just a fucking shovel. I was choosing the 4-lane highway. This is when I decided to pick up that fucking shovel that we all decide not to take. I had to make a change in my life. So I said, you know what? I have to join the military. I went on a Navy SEAL training. Became the only person I believe in history to go through 3 Navy SEAL Hell Weeks in 1 year. I completed 2 of them. Hell Week is 130 hours of continuous training. You might get 2 hours of sleep. The first few weeks get you ready for this hard 1 week of training. I had to become obsessed. No matter what was in front of me, I had to figure out a way to overcome it. So when things hit you in life that you're afraid of or you're not good at, the first thing you're going to say to yourself is, why am I here anyway? This isn't for me. The water's too cold. The sun's too hot. I'm getting up too early. Why am I doing this to myself? That's what the normal mind says. I had to start training my mind to think about, how the fuck can I get through this? Not giving myself a way out. Never giving myself, creating a wall around all the fucking ways out in my mind. I had to slowly start to build this fucking wall so my mind knew this motherfucker is not going to give himself a way out of here. In my first Hell Week, I had a huge setback. I was broken. My legs were broken. I had double pneumonia. I got rolled back to day 1, week 1 of Navy SEAL training. I got through that second Hell Week. During the second Hell Week, I actually broke my knee. I continued to limp around for a couple weeks. I couldn't make it anymore. Got rolled back to day 1, week 1. I'll never forget standing there in front of Captain Bowen. He was the CEO in charge of Navy SEAL training at the time. And he had no mercy on anybody. If he believed in managing your expectations, I wouldn't be here today. He challenged me again. I was challenged my whole life, not by the mindset of managing expectations, by exceeding expectations, not by managing them. I'm standing there with crutches. I'm sitting in his office. He looks at me, he goes, Goggins, this is your last time. We're gonna put you through Navy SEAL training. This will be your 3rd Hell Week in 1 year. We're not gonna put you through a 4th. So this is your last time. I'm sitting thinking, how am I gonna get through this? I'm badly jacked up. My legs are broken. My knee is messed up. And he goes, you have a couple of months to get better. A couple of months isn't gonna do it. I won't get healed up in a couple of months. But I realized I'm gonna get through this shit. I'm gonna find a way to get through it because why? I put barriers in my mind. So my 3rd Hell Week, I went in there with pretty much, I would put a black sock on first. I would get duct tape. And I duct taped my ankles all the way up to my calf every single morning. And then I put another black sock over it. And what that did, that prevented me from moving my ankle. So I didn't really, I wasn't flexing my shin as much. And I started running with just my hip flexors. In this Hell Week, it was a bad Hell Week. We had a guy die on Thursday morning of Hell Week. I went on to become a Navy SEAL. Greatness is not something that you meet once. It's something that you meet thousands of fucking times in your life. And you don't reach it if you're not constantly in constant fucking pursuit of fucking greatness. So if my mind were to say right now, I'm great, I just lost. We're gonna grow. We're not gonna triple down on our strengths. We're not gonna do that crap. We're gonna work on our weaknesses so we grow. We need friction to do that. Without friction, there's no growth. Without friction, there's confusion. Confusion is, David Goggins, how did you become who you are today? I put a bunch of fucking friction in my life. And I grew. That's how I did it. You know how you get mentally tough? It's a lifestyle. Instead of hitting that fucking snooze button in the fucking morning and not making your bed, not cleaning your house, you don't hit the snooze button. You get up. You don't want to go run, you go run. You don't want to go swim, you go swim. You don't want to make your bed, you make your bed. You don't want to clean your house, you clean your house. You don't want to study, you fucking study. That's how you start to callous your mind. So that became my life. If you say you're gonna wake up at 4 o'clock in the fucking morning to go run, wake up at 4 o'clock it's gonna suck. It's not gonna be fun. Do something that sucks every single day of your life. That's how you grow. Embrace the suck.
I will never forget that cup of coffee. Well, a couple of years ago, I was traveling when my schedule worked out on Christmas Eve. I thought the airport was going to be a zoo, so I got there a couple hours early. It wasn't crowded at all, so for me, that means coffee. So I get down into my Terminal D, and I see the green sign. And when I travel these days, I always wear earbuds, so I'm rocking out to Coldplay. And I see the sign, I get in line, and there's one woman in front of me, and she's having a very animated conversation with the barista. She's kind of waving her arms, and they're both smiling and laughing. So I wasn't in a rush, but out of curiosity, I popped out my earbuds. And sure enough, they're going on about their holidays and their plans and the kids and presents, and she starts to move down the line. So it's my turn to order. And I was greeted with this very warm and sincere welcome. This woman said to me, "Hi, my name's Lily. What's your name?" I said, "I'm Ryan." She said, "Ryan, what can I make for you today?" I said, "Well, I want a grande pumpkin spice latte." She said, "You want whipped cream on that, don't you?" I said, yeah, I want the whipped cream. She said, "I'll tell you what I'm gonna do." She said, "I'm gonna make it extra hot, load it up with whipped cream, sprinkle a little nutmeg on top. That's how I like it. You're gonna love it." I said, "Sounds great." She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Cleveland." She said, "Are you going back to Cleveland to spend the holiday with your family?" I said, "Yes." Now, at this point, I start looking around for the camera, right? I'm trying to get a latte. So I move down the line, and the conversation continues, and she's funny. She's asking me questions about my family and our holiday traditions. She's laughing, and I'm laughing, and she hands me my drink and says to me, "Ryan, have a safe trip back to Cleveland. Go create some extraordinary memories with your family. When you come back through the Minneapolis airport, I want you to stop here and tell me all about it." So I get my drink, I start walking away, and I stop and I look back at this woman, and I think to myself, it's Christmas Eve. Most people would rather be anywhere else in the world than serving coffee in an airport. Not her. It was like she was meant to be there. And I couldn't help myself. I had to go back. So I did. I walked back and I said, "Excuse me, Lily." And she jumps around. "Ryan, is everything okay with the latte?" I said, "No." I said, "The latte is perfect. I just had to come back and ask you, what is your secret to making such meaningful connections over serving coffee?" Well, she corrected me. She said, "Ryan, I'm not serving coffee." I said, "Okay, what are you doing?" She had thought about this. And what she told me was, "I'm pouring happiness into people's lives." I said, "You're pouring what?" What is pouring happiness? And her definition of pouring happiness, she wants to be happy in her life. She wants to be around happy people. She cares about her customers. She wants them to come back. So she chooses, even on Christmas Eve, to smile, to have fun, to help people, to just be happy. Instead of just focusing on how to be successful, focus on how to be helpful. The other thing she understands and masters straight away is the very specific and intentional decision around how she chooses to show up, even on Christmas Eve. You know this. A lot of things happen in work and in our lives that are beyond our sphere of influence or control. She doesn't control the weather in Minneapolis. Trust me, I live there. All she gets to own is how she chooses to respond to those things. Decide how you show up. It's interesting, when I met Lily, and she would have had no way of knowing this, but I was pretty heavy in the heart and had a lot on my mind. My parents, both retired school teachers, married 45 years. About 3 months before that holiday, I got a call from Mom. We got some really tough medical news about Dad. It was a terminal diagnosis, and we knew we probably weren't going to have a lot of time. So I was sitting in that airport on Christmas Eve, not in the best place in the world. I will never forget that cup of coffee. When you decide to show up consistently as the best version of who you are, it gives you your best opportunity to meet people where they are. And you never know when someone needs you to be your best.
I was a 19-year-old kid, and I was miserable. I was in love with my high school sweetheart. We were that couple that was really annoying. So we went to school together. We signed up for classes together. We shared a U-Haul on the way to school together. We lived in the same dorm together. We walked to class. We walked to breakfast in the morning and walked to class together. I mean, we were just joined at the hip, and we were completely crazy infatuated in love. And then halfway through the first year of college, she discovered beer and other boys on the same night, and she cheated. I completely fell apart. I stopped going to class. I barely ate anything, certainly nothing healthy. I stopped studying. I just stopped caring about the world. Literally couldn't get out of bed. And I never thought about it until years later. Reading changed my life, because I was still reading. It was one thing that's brought me through everything. And I happened to pick up the school newspaper, and I opened it up, and there was this full-page ad. It was this perfect white sandy beach, turquoise water, big green palm tree. And across the top of the ad, it said, "Escape." Students needed for summertime jobs in the Dominican Republic. So I escaped. I went down there, and one night, my friend Kevin and we hopped into a car after dropping off a client. So we're going down this road, 85 miles an hour in this car, and the windows were open, and that air was coming in. That amazing humid, if you've been in the Caribbean, that just gorgeous, amazing humid air is coming in. And then we came upon a corner. We take that corner 85 miles an hour, and that corner became the turning point that put my feet on this stage for you today. Kevin grabs the wheel, he goes, "Hold on!" And I brace. And the car starts sliding sideways, and that weird slow motion thing happens. Kevin's gripping the wheel, trying to make the corner, and all of a sudden, smack. When I came to, I looked over, and Kevin is screaming at the top of his lungs, "Get out of the car, Brendon, get out of the car!" And I look over, and a whole big chunk of his head is open. So I pull myself out of the windshield of this car, and he's screaming over here, and I stand up eventually on the hood of the car, and I look, and I notice all this blood on me. And I remember just looking down, and that slow motion thing's happening. I just thought, did I even matter? And I start seeing all these images of my life when I'm surrounded by people that I care for. There's a cake in front of me. Here's my friends singing. My mom leading them in that goofy song. There's my sister, just swinging and smiling right next to me. And it makes you wonder, did I love? Did I love openly and honestly and completely? Or did I hold back because that one time I got hurt? And just as I was about to pass out, I noticed a glint, like a sparkle, something shiny, a reflection in the blood going off the hood of the car, and it made me look up. And there was this bright, big, beautiful moon that night. And I just immediately felt this connection, like I knew I was gonna be okay. And I felt like the big guy upstairs reached down to me and handed me life's golden ticket. He reached down and said, "Here you go, kid. You're still alive. You can still love and matter. But now you know the clock is ticking." Mortality, motivation. I got it as a 19-year-old kid. People say, "Why are you so successful?" I'm like, I got mortality motivation when I was 19. That's a blessing. Most people don't get that till they're 60. Don't worry, Kevin and I, we both survived. See, I'm still here. It's okay. I made it. But the one thing that I took away from that entire thing was that moment and those questions, because I remembered them and I thought about them as I was healing. I was like, what was that about? Why did I feel so unhappy with that moment? Because I thought, in the last moments of life, there must be this transcendence, and I was not happy. And I realized it was because of how I'd been living my life, and I wasn't living to my questions. I knew I got those questions. Did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? And as soon as I got that those were the questions I'm gonna evaluate myself with at the end of the life, it gave me the power of what my late mentor Wayne Dyer taught, the power of intention. That breath you just took, feel it. What a blessing that is you got that life. What a blessing is you got that breath. That means you still got something inside. You gotta work for it. You gotta contribute for it. You gotta give for it. You gotta lead for it. You gotta love for it, because you still have something not just in you, you're still here for a reason. And now you just gotta earn that blessing.
I was becoming very good at becoming the invisible kid. I was born in Hong Kong. I immigrated to Canada when I was 14 years old. First day, I didn't even go out the door. I was so afraid. I was one of the only 3 Chinese in my school. I was getting bullied, I was getting beat up, I was getting pushed around. I would never ask questions that I would put on my hand. Right after school, I would just grab my backpack, go to my locker, not look at anyone, not make any eye contact, and just go home. Shortly after that, my mom and dad got divorced when I was 16 years old. One day when I came home from school, my mom would stay in the bedroom, but she was talking on the phone with somebody. And then after the phone call, she opened up the door, and I could see like she was crying. I said, "Mom, is everything okay?" And she's like, "Well, you know, I was talking on the phone with the dad, and he just told me he went bankrupt, just filed for bankruptcy. He couldn't send us money anymore." My mom is always a very positive. It's just like an angel to me. But that's the first time in my entire life that I looked at my mom now in a country where she doesn't speak the language, son doesn't kind of going through high school. Her face, the hopelessness. I said, I don't care what effort it takes, I never want to see that again. I had no father figure, I had no role model. My father, quote unquote father figure, was when it was late night, I was watching a Bruce Lee movie. It was Way of the Dragon, where he fought a Chuck Norris. And he was a guy who couldn't speak English, went to Rome and got criticized, and then suddenly he was kicking ass and protecting people, so he became my hero. In a way, virtually he became that father figure I never had, that strong, muscular, strong, like kick-ass kung fu master, right? Right after that, near my house there was a karate school. So I signed up for the karate school. That gave me the confidence, that gave me courage. And then from there, I just made a commitment, whatever it takes. I don't need my dad. I'll be the man of the family. I'll take care of my mom. So that's when I started thinking about, okay, how can I do something to make some money? And I was mowing lawns for people. I was delivering, paper, anything that would make a buck. Really, I was trying all kinds of business ideas. And then afterwards, I started my own one-man advertising agency. And that was my first taste of success. I was being able to provide for my mom. Finally, now I could go to a grocery store and not have to go to the almost expired section to buy fruit and vegetables. That was very, very much the turning point. So afterwards, I haven't talked to my dad for a number of years, right? Because I was angry at him. Until I had matured a little bit, then I called him and then we would talk about what happened. And he could see me, doing very well. I was making about $10,000 a month as a young guy, 6-figure a year. I knew he was just getting by, and he was worrying about a place to live. So at that time, I went back to Hong Kong, and I was walking down the street, the city in Hong Kong. We stopped. I looked, I said, "Dad, you see that window up there?" "Yeah." I reached in my pocket. I pulled a set of keys. I put it in his hands. My dad looked puzzled. I said, "Dad, I bought that unit for you. You got a place to live in now. This is yours." He was bawling. All he could say is, "Son, let's go get lunch." That look made everything worthwhile. At the time, he We talked and he said, next week, son, I'm going into the hospital for a regular checkup. And then I know the date after he did a checkup, I didn't get the call. I thought it was a bit strange. The next day I got a call from my aunt. I picked up the phone, it was like 3 a.m., very late at night. Your dad's in emergency. He said, what happened? Well, he found that he needed surgery immediately. We need to operate him. But at the time, I was chasing the biggest deal I've ever done in my life. I said, I had to be in the US, I gotta finish this before I would come back, because it's a very important deal. I had to do a little video conference with my dad. I could see him in the hospital, hair all gray, he had this tube, he couldn't speak. I said, Dad, as soon as I finish, I will come back and see you, right? And I thought I would make him proud. I thought I would close the deal. I'll go to Hong Kong. I never thought about it. And that was the last time I talked to him. That was it. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to say anything. It's the biggest regret. It's truly the biggest regret. And I wish I knew I had. And from that point on, I realized something, that I was chasing achievement, was chasing all these things. And when suddenly my dad was gone, suddenly all this stuff means a lot less. It suddenly means a lot less to me about fame, money, wealth, all this stuff. I believe in life you go through kind of 4 stages. The first stage is what I call survival, which is where I was when I was very young. And then going from survival to security. You're paying the bills. You got a roof over your head, you got a car, you're taking care of your family. And then a percentage of the people would move to what I call stage 3, which is success. When you're successful, you don't just have everything you need, you have everything you want. And I operate in that phase, at that stage, for the first, I would say, 10 years of my career. And then after that incident, after my dad passed away, then I shift from success to significance. When you shift from success to significance, it's no longer just about you. It's no longer just about, hey, here's what I want. Here's what I want to have. Here's what I want to own. From a poor immigrant boy who couldn't speak a word of English, now my work is impacting people in 100 countries. It sounds so cliche, but it is. What's your legacy? What's your impact? What do you want to leave behind? What do you want to be known for after you're gone? Our society, we don't take the time to just slow down a bit to be grateful and find the little things to be grateful. The people around me, my family, my friends, my team, my students, every little thing. All the tragedy, all the mistakes, all the headaches, all the hardship. You might not like it, you would probably hate it, but you would look back and that would be the greatest thing that ever happened to you. All depends on how you interpret it. And that's why people, they keep chasing and chasing and chasing the next thing. They're never happy. If you're not grateful with what you have, you're not going to be grateful even if you have more. So I say it's be grateful with what you have while you strive for more.
People ask me all the time, what is the secret to success? And I always tell them what the short version is, you got to have a 22-inch biceps. And you got to be able to kill predators with your bare hands. And of course, you got to have this charming Austrian accent. That's a given. The long version is that I actually always had 5 rules. You don't need to be a bodybuilding champion. You don't need to want to be an action hero or anything like that. If you want to excel in whatever you do, those rules are for you. So my first rule is find your vision and follow it. If you don't have a goal, if you don't have a vision, you just drift around. You're not going to be happy. I grew up after the Second World War. Austria, right along with Germany, lost the Second World War. There was, of course, depression. There was a terrible economic situation. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to escape. And luckily, one day in school, I watched a documentary about America. I knew exactly that is where I wanted to end up. The question was just, how do I get there? How do I get to America? No one had the money to travel or anything. But one day I was fortunate enough to see a bodybuilding magazine. And on the cover was this very muscular guy. Mr. Universe becomes Hercules star. His name was Reg Park. I read the article as fast as I could, learning about how he grew up in Leeds in England, poor, and how he trained 5 hours a day, every single day, and trained and trained and trained, and then he finally became Mr. Great Britain, and then became Mr. Universe. And then he won a second Mr. Universe title and a third Mr. Universe title, and then all of a sudden he landed in Rome in Cinecittà doing Hercules movies. And as I read, I became more and more certain. I had that vision very clearly laid out, to be a champion on that same stage where he won the Mr. Universe, and then to move to America, then get into movies. From that moment on, everything that I did, no matter how hard I had to work or how much I had to struggle, it didn't matter, because I knew what the purpose was and I found my passion. Always discover your vision and the rest will follow. Now my second rule is never ever think small. You have to go and shoot for the stars. I didn't just think about being in movies. No, I wanted to be a movie star. I wanted to have above the title billing. I wanted to become the highest paid entertainer. I basically wanted to be another John Wayne. What's wrong with that? Never think small, think big. My third rule is ignore the naysayers. I think it is natural that when you have a big vision and big dreams and you have big goals, that people are going to say around you, I don't think it can be done. I think it's impossible. I mean, it started right away when I was 15 years old and I became a bodybuilder. Right after the top, when I said, I want to be a world champion in bodybuilding, I want to be Mr. Universe. They immediately said, are you crazy? Bodybuilding is an American sport, forget about it, that's nuts. And then when I wanted to go into show business, after I won 13 world championship titles in bodybuilding, I said, I want to be like Reg Park. I want to be a Hercules, I want to get into movies. Well, I tell you, when I met those agents and managers, their reaction was, oh, Arnold, that is so funny. You want to be what, a leading man? Oh, come on. I mean, look, first of all, let's start with your body. You're gigantic, you're like a monster. And then your accent, oh, it gives me the chills just listening to your German bullshit. Come on now. Have you ever seen an international movie star with a German accent? It doesn't happen. Forget about that. And then you name, what is it, Schwarzenegger or something like that? People are gonna storm the theater and the movie houses because Schwarzenegger is starring in a movie. Oh yeah, I can see that already. Imagine that. Everywhere I turned, they said, no, it won't happen, it's not gonna happen, and forget about it. Luckily, I did not listen. I started taking acting classes, English classes, even accent removal classes. I ran around all day saying lines like, a fine wine grows on a vine. All of a sudden, I got a little break. All of a sudden, I got a TV show, a little part, then another little part, and then Pumping On and Stay Hungry, and then of course I landed the big role of Conan the Barbarian. So finally I got the big break. And you know what was so interesting about it was the director said at the press conference, if we wouldn't have had Schwarzenegger with those muscles, we would have had to build one. And then when I did Terminator, James Cameron said the I'll be back line became one of the most famous movie lines in history because of Arnold's crazy accent, because he sounded like a machine. So as you see, everything that the naysayers said was a liability became an asset. Ignore the naysayers. The fourth rule is work your ass off. You never want to fail because you didn't work hard enough. It doesn't matter in what area you're in. No pain, no gain. Listen, when I came to the United States, I remember that I trained 5 hours a day, every day, and I was managing a construction business and I was a bricklayer. And I went to college also. And I took acting classes from 8 o'clock at night to 12 o'clock midnight. Every day I did that. Work your butt off. That's what I always believe. No matter what you do, work, work, work. And my fifth and last rule is don't just take. Give something back. Tear down that mirror that makes you always look at yourself. And you will be able to look beyond that mirror and you will see the millions and millions of people that need your help. And this is why I tried to take every opportunity that I could to give something back. I started training Special Olympians. I started after-school programs for the most vulnerable children, for inner-city children, to make them be able to say no to drugs, no to gangs, and no to violence. We all can create change, whether it is in our neighborhood or in our local schools, because the bottom line is, it is up to us. Have a vision, think big, ignore the naysayers, work your ass off, and give back and change the world. Because if not us, who? If not now, when?
My grandmother became my first hero. Growing up, my grandmother never used an alarm clock. But every morning, my grandmother would wake up at 4:15. And at 4:16, her feet would hit the floor, usually right in front of my face. And that's what would wake me up. But I would lay there and I would pretend like I was still asleep, because me and 4:15 really didn't get along. But Grandma would look at the back of my head. I could feel her staring at me, and then finally she would say, "Now, sugar, Grandmama know you ain't sleep. You just supposed to go on and get on up and get ready for school." And my grandmother was known for saying things that would kind of make you a little angry because they made so much sense and you couldn't argue with her. Parents, you know, there's things that you, when you become parents, you start to say to your own kids. Like my grandmother would say, "Now, son, you knew when you laid down there last night that you had to get up this morning. I don't know why every single morning you lay there and act surprised. You ought to be thankful that the Lord saw fit to wake you up this in your right mind." But what my grandmother was encouraging me to do was simply to be grateful for the opportunity. In spite of all that I had been through in my life, she just wanted to make sure that I understood the opportunity that I've been given. My life got started, it was a little rough. It was a little rough start. I was born 2 months premature. My mother was walking up a flight of stairs, and she didn't know this at the time, but a woman she had had an argument with earlier was standing above her holding a pot of boiling water. As my mom made her way up those stairs, that woman dumped that water onto my mom and sent her tumbling down the stairs and into premature labor. She received third-degree burns to over 25% of her body. And when we were finally allowed to leave the hospital, as you can imagine, my mom was in a great deal of pain. Those burns just barely missed her face and covered most of the front of her body. So when we got home, she began taking a heavy sedative, pain medication, to help her recover. When she took that medication, it was very difficult for her to watch me, so I would bounce around a lot. I'd stay with my mom for a little bit, and then I'd go stay with Grandma, and I'd stay with some neighbors, aunties, and then back to my mother's house. I did that for the first 3 years of my life. When I was 3 years old, I was back at my mom's house, and I got into her purse, I found that medication, I swallowed everything in the bottle. When they found me, they rushed me to the hospital, and my heart would stop, and eventually I went into a coma. But because of that accident, because of that incident, the state of California, they did an investigation. And the conclusion that they came to was that it wasn't an accident. They removed me from my mother's home. I was made a ward of the state, and eventually I went into the foster care system. Shortly after I arrived to one of my foster homes, my foster mom, her name was Miss Alexander. Miss Alexander began locking me inside the closet with no light. She'd open the closet door, she'd kick me, hit me with a stick or a strap or whatever she had. It was while I was in that foster home that I was sexually abused for the first time in my life. And oftentimes people will ask, you know, if that has to be the worst thing that could happen to someone. I have scars on my body that you can't see. I have a burn here on my hand that she put there with an iron. But all of that pain went away. The worst thing that Mrs. Alexander would do is she would open the closet door, she would stand over me, and she would say, "You're stupid and you ain't gonna never amount to nothing." And that hurt me more than any of the physical kicks or the physical pain, because I believed it for a long time. I believed that I would never amount to anything, just like she said. I didn't know this at the time, I found out a little bit later, but my grandmother, my hero, she had started going back and forth to court, trying to prove that she could take care of an active, handsome little boy. And eventually the state of California, they granted her full custody of me. And I'll never forget standing on Miss Alexander's front porch waiting. She had my little belongings, everything that I had. I remember standing there, it may have only been a half an hour, but it felt like an eternity, and I can remember thinking maybe no one's coming. But after a while, at the end of the block, I see the ugliest car I've ever seen in my life. And the car pulls up right in front of the porch, and I remember all I could see are these two big glasses, bifocals. And I found out later that Grandma had glaucoma, she wasn't even supposed to be driving. But she gets out of that big car, and she's got on this white floppy hat with this, it was a flower right there in the middle. And I remember she had on this long white dress that came all the way down to her ankles. And I found out later that, that was Grandma's Sunday best. It was an outfit that she only reserved for special occasions. And I can remember for once in my life feeling like I was some special occasion. But I remember jumping into Grandma's arms and squeezing her, and I remember her whispering and saying to me, everything's okay. You're family. And everything was okay, just like Grandmother said. And I had a lot to look forward to. I found out that my mom was going to court trying to prove that she could take care of me. And I can remember sitting there with my mother, and we talk, and we had a lot of different conversations. One thing I can remember saying, Mama, one day when I get big, I'm gonna buy you a nice house with a fireplace. I said, Mama, one day I'm gonna buy you a nice car. Not like Grandmama, so get you a nice one. But the truth is, I just really wanted to become a family again, and that's what I looked forward to. When I was 12 years old, I was asleep on my grandmother's floor. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. We get a knock on the door, and it was my mom's roommate. Miss Howell, come quick. Miss Howell was my grandma. She said, come quick, it's Ruth. Ruth was my mom. She said, I can't wake her up, I think she's dead. And I can remember laying on that floor, kind of wishing it was, hoping that it was maybe a dream. But it wasn't. And that's how I found out that all the hopes and dreams and things that I had to look forward to weren't going to happen. I became very angry. I became confused. I was hurt. I didn't really understand what was happening. I started acting out, hanging out with the wrong people, breaking into houses, started stealing cars. I can remember not really caring what happened to me. I continued that behavior until I was 19. When I was 19, I found myself standing in front of a judge. I was handcuffed, had a chain around my waist, and my handcuffs were attached to that chain. The judge looked at me and says, the state of California sentences you to 15 years in prison for armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. That day, when that door closed behind me for the first time as a convicted felon, I remember standing in that empty cell. I remember my knees started to get weak and they started to shake uncontrollably. I collapsed and I fell to the floor, and I just started crying alone. I can remember hearing voices. Heard the voice of my foster mom saying, you're stupid, you ain't gonna never amount to nothing. Heard the voice of family members and friends of family that said, that boy's gonna end up just like his father. My father was a career criminal, he died in prison. I can remember laying there thinking to myself that this is where I'm gonna die. But here's what happened that would change my life. Shortly after I arrived to that prison, there was an educator there. His name was Charles Lyles, 6'3", ex-Marine. And I don't know what it was about me, but every time he saw me, he'd say, hey, Mr. Humphrey. And he had this big smile on his face, a smile that my kids would say, that's creepy. But he smiled and he said, hey, Mr. Humphrey, how are you doing? He always called me Mr. Humphrey. He gave me that respect. He walked into my cell. He looked at me and he said, Mr. Humphrey, he says, prison doesn't have to be your life. He says, you can get out of here and you can do great things. He started to walk away, and before he walked out of my cell, he turned around one last time and he says, Mr. Humphrey? I said, yes, sir. He says, I believe in you. He walked out of my cell. And if he had continued to stand there, he would have seen the tears running down my face because no one had ever said that to me. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm gonna make some changes and I'm gonna change my life. And a little over 4 years after the day I originally collapsed and fell to the floor, I walked out of that prison on parole. That was over 18 years ago. I've never been back other than to mentor and help other people. But here's what I know. I know that when you've had a rough life, when you feel unwanted, I know that when you have hopes and dreams and when you have things that you can look forward to and when you have people in place that support you and push you, I know that that gives you a reason to live. It is a great day to be alive. And that's something that I haven't always said, but now it's something that I say to myself every single day at some point. If I'm having a great day or a bad day, that's something that I say. But what I also understand is that what my grandmother was thanking her higher power for each and every day was for the opportunity that she'd been given. And she never missed an opportunity to tell anyone that would listen, especially me, it's a great day to be alive.
My earliest memory is my father hitting my mother in the face as hard as he could. And I remember seeing her on the floor and then looking at him, this giant of a man who I thought, my God, he says he loves her. What is he gonna do to me? And all I could think, I want to protect her. I want to protect her. And how wrong it was. And I said, I gotta be strong. And I gotta get strength so that I can protect her. And every time he came home, we were scared. We didn't know. I literally wet the bed till I was 14 years old because I didn't know what was gonna happen. I would wake up to glass breaking, just sounds, people screaming, and it was a nightmare. We lived a nightmare for years. And I remember my mother coming into our room and saying, we're leaving. Pack our stuff, we're out of here. And we would grab everything we had and we'd put it in garbage bags. And we'd tie it up and we'd wait to go. And then she'd come back in and she'd say, we can't go. We can't leave. Where am I gonna go? And I just remember feeling like, let's go anywhere. I don't care. We could be in the street. But she couldn't do it. And he went on, terrorizing us forever. And it was like, what could we do? You have to understand that people in this situation feel entirely hopeless. Hopeless. We were hopeless. So many things, I thought, I'll never be like that. I'll never do that. But then I picked up a lot of other damaging things that come from that trauma. A lot of other things that had been assimilated into my life. Here I am, as a man, I felt like, hey, it's my way or the highway. I remember times with my daughter Azriel, and I would yell at her as if she was a 30-year-old man. I constantly apologize, constantly call them and say, I'm sorry. Daddy didn't get it. Daddy missed it. And that woke me up. It woke me up. It was this catalyst that changed my life forever. Because here I was, a very successful man. Very successful. But what you have to realize is that success is the warmest place to hide. It does not matter what you look like. It doesn't matter. Anyone, anywhere can be victimized. And no man, woman, or child should ever put up with being treated as less than a human being, ever. How did we get that far off? When people are looking the other way, when the whole thing is geared where you can't ask for help or you are gonna lose your job. Or if you bring it up, how in the world are you gonna afford an attorney in order to fight this case? You need three things in order to come forward with a lot of your damage and the things that's happened to you. You need distance emotionally, you need distance financially, and you need distance physically. Coming out with your story is probably one of the hardest things ever. And this is one thing I love about what Safe Horizon provides. It's a safe haven, this place to go, the services that people need. And I'm telling you, this is my company. This is more valuable. You know, I'm promoting movies and TV shows and the whole thing, but I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this because it's fixable. See, understand, this is something that we can be deprogrammed. This is the deal. We have to speak up. You can see it, but you have to show people you are changing the world.
If you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better. To pass SEAL training, there are a series of long swims that must be completed. One is the night swim. Before the swim, the instructors joyfully brief the students on all the species of sharks that inhabit the waters off San Clemente. They assure you, however, that no student has ever been eaten by a shark, at least not that they can remember. But you are also taught that if a shark begins to circle your position, stand your ground. Do not swim away. Do not act afraid. And if the shark, hungry for a midnight snack, darts towards you, then summons up all your strength and punch him in the snout, and he will turn and swim away. There are a lot of sharks in the world. If you hope to complete the swim, you will have to deal with them. So if you want to change the world, don't back down from the sharks. Over a few weeks of difficult training, my SEAL class, which started with 150 men, was down to just 42. There were now 6 boat crews of 7 men each. I was in the boat with the tall guys, but the best boat crew we had was made up of the little guys, the Munchkin crew, we called them. No one was over 5'5". The Munchkin boat crew had 1 American Indian, 1 African American, 1 Polish American, 1 Greek American, 1 Italian American, and 2 tough kids from the Midwest. They out-paddled, outran, and outswam all the other boat crews. The big men in the other boat crews would always make good-natured fun of the tiny little flippers the Munchkins put on their tiny little feet prior to every swim. But somehow these little guys from every corner of the nation and the world always had the last laugh, swimming faster than everyone and reaching the shore long before the rest of us. SEAL training was a great equalizer. Nothing mattered but your will to succeed, not your color, not your ethnic background, not your education, not your social status. If you want to change the world, measure a person by the size of their heart, not by the size of their flippers. The 9th week of training is referred to as Hell Week. It is 6 days of no sleep, constant physical and mental harassment, and 1 special day at the Mud Flats. The Mud Flats are an area between San Diego and Tijuana where the water runs off and creates the Tijuana Sloughs, a swampy patch of terrain where the mud will engulf you. It is on Wednesday of Hell Week that you paddle down to the Mud Flats and spend the next 15 hours trying to survive the freezing cold, the howling wind, and the incessant pressure to quit from the instructors. As the sun began to set that Wednesday evening, my training class, having committed some egregious infraction of the rules, was ordered into the mud. The mud consumed each man till there was nothing visible but our heads. The instructors told us we could leave the mud if only 5 men would quit. Only 5 men, just 5 men, and we could get out of the oppressive cold. Looking around the mud flat, it was apparent that some students were about to give up. It was still over 8 hours till the sun came up. 8 more hours of bone-chilling cold. The chattering teeth and the shivering moans of the trainees were so loud, it was hard to hear anything. And then one voice began to echo through the night. One voice raised in song. The song was terribly out of tune, but sung with great enthusiasm. One voice became 2, and 2 became 3, and before long, everyone in the class was singing. The instructors threatened us with more time in the mud if we kept up the singing, but the singing persisted, and somehow the mud seemed a little warmer, and the wind a little tamer, and the dawn not so far away. If I have learned anything in my time traveling the world, it is the power of hope. The power of one person, a Washington, a Lincoln, King, Mandela, and even a young girl from Pakistan, Malala. One person can change the world by giving people hope. So if you want to change the world, start each day with a task completed. Find someone to help you through life. Respect everyone. Know that life is not fair and that you will fail often. But if you take some risks, step up when the times are the toughest, face down the bullies, lift up the downtrodden, and never ever give up. If you do these things, the next generation and the generations that follow will live in a world far better than the one we have today. And what started here will indeed have changed the world for the better.
I had to feed 22 horses every morning before I earned the right to have breakfast. Imagine an 8.5-year-old kid getting up in the dark in Canada and going outside and opening the barn door. And I remember there would be like 30 rats every time I opened the barn door. And they would scurry around, and I would hope that none of them would stay around. And one time I went back to the house and I said, "Dad, can you come with me?" And he locked the door and he says, "Go out and do your chores and don't come back until they're done." And it was kind of the beginning of me realizing that I wasn't in a supportive environment. And I learned one thing, and one thing only, is that if I was willing to work hard, then I could get my dad's attention. I remember waking up, I was about 13 or 14 years old, and this was the day my dad had promised me it was gonna be yes. This was the day we were gonna play together. We were gonna throw the football back and forth, and I was super excited. I popped out of my bed and I ran down the stairs, and I saw my father where he always is. His ankle is chained to the desk. But as I got closer, I knew something was wrong. It was like I could feel there was a heaviness in the air. And I started to get nervous. And I went, "Dad?" And he went, "Yes." I went, you ready to go play?" And the weirdest thing happened is he turned, he looked at me, and I felt myself shrinking down. And he stood up, and this shadow cast over me. And he goes, "Do you have any idea what it takes to put food on the table? Do you think that this roof just puts itself there? Money doesn't grow on trees, you know. One day you're gonna have to work hard for money. Now get out and play on your own before I put you to work." And I turned around and I walked out, and I never asked him again to play, ever. I don't have one memory of playing with my dad. Not one. The only way I connected with him was when he was working around the house doing a chore. I'd say, "Dad, can I help you?" I'd hand him the nails, or I'd hold the measuring tape. It was the only way. Never once. He never came to my hockey games. He dropped me off in the car and stayed in the car. While all the other parents were tying their skates, I was there alone. I would try to score as many goals as I could so I could go in and tell him that I scored the winning goals. So he'd want to come and look, but he never did. I remember winning honors in school for academic achievement, looking out in the crowd, hoping to see my dad, but he was never there. So the only solace I had was to work hard. So I doubled down on that, and I worked hard, and I'd call him out to look at the task being done, and invariably it was never good enough. So I doubled down again and worked harder. It didn't feel good at the time, but in life, what you do, if you do what is easy, life will be difficult. But if you do what is difficult, life will be easy. I got the difficult part out front, and I got really good at it. By the time I was 14, I saved up enough money to get a scooter. By the time I was 16, I had my first car. By the time I was 17, I thought, you know what? I'm out of here. This sucks. I mean, I could go out and make 4 times the amount of money living on my own, even if I have to pay rent. I don't care. So I moved out. I drove a taxi. I did carpentry. I cut lawns. I washed windows. I did anything that was hard work because that's all I knew. And then my life changed. I got a call from my stepmom, and she said, "Your dad has cancer." So I jumped on a plane and I did everything I could. I took care of the house. He said to me he had some back taxes from Canada that were unpaid. I said, "Yes, I'll pay them for you." I did everything I possibly could. And I remember the day I had to leave to go back to take care of my family. I had a young son at the time, and I had nothing left. And I asked my dad, well, he was probably 98 pounds lying in the bed. And I said, "Dad, can you think of a time when I made you proud?" And I'm thinking to myself, my God, there's a whole bunch. I was almost a millionaire by that time. I'd done so many things. I'd risen up, I'd opened a restaurant, I'd learned a new language, I'd done so many things. This was the time he was going to go, of course, son, let me read from a list. But instead, he said nothing that I can think of. And I don't know if it broke my spirit or if I thought I had hit rock bottom, I hit another layer. But when I got back home, actually, I was fired from my job. My marriage had fallen apart. I had no money left that I'd paid to support him, so I got evicted from my apartment and I moved back with my mom at the age of 30. So there I am, 30 years old, working 16 hours a day for 20 years, and I have absolutely nothing to show for it, except maybe a skill set on how to work hard. But I tell you what, when you're down there and you think there's nothing left, it's the foundation to grow from. I thought, what am I going to do now? And some little bird mentioned real estate, so I thought I'd get into real estate. I got into real estate, and that's when I met my first mentor that transformed my life. I was in my office one night really late, and I was having a conversation with my mentor, and he walks in and he leans against the door and he goes, "You're still here?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You really have a great work ethic." And I went, "You talking to me?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm talking to you." He goes, "You're awesome." I'm like, "Are you still talking to me?" It's like I never had anybody tell me that they believed in me. My father certainly was always, "You could do better, you could do better, you could do better." Yeah, it drove me, but it didn't make me feel confident. And I doubted it at first. And we started to talk. And he goes, "Oh, so you've labeled yourself stupid as a loser and a skinny little kid." He goes, "How do you feel about that?" And I said, "I still feel that way." He says, "You're 30 years old." I go, "Yeah, I know, but I still felt that way inside." He says, "Okay, we're gonna change that. Who's an idol that you have?" I said, "Well, one of my favorite is like Clint Eastwood. He's like rugged. I'm kind of rugged. I feel rugged." He goes, "Perfect. How does that feel when you say that?" I said, "That feels pretty good." He goes, "That's it. I want you to say that 1,000 times. 1,000 times every day, or more if you want. Loser out, ruggedly handsome in." So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna reprogram your brain. Your brain is like software. We're just gonna reprogram it. I said, "How do I do that?" He goes, "Just every time you have a chance, say, 'I'm ruggedly handsome, I'm ruggedly handsome.'" He said, "The words that follow I am follow you. You just didn't know it. You had shitty programming. But now we're gonna change that and change that forever." And I remember driving home, I was so excited. I was so excited because I could change my program. I didn't know it. I thought I was stuck that way my whole life. And all I had to do was have the energy to put it into changing the way I see myself. And I just said it over. I remember screaming in the car, "I'm ruggedly handsome, ruggedly handsome, ruggedly handsome." I'd get up in the morning, I'd say it over and over and over again. I'd say it as much as I possibly could. And then spontaneously one morning, I was in the shower and I said, "I'm the greatest real estate agent in my area. I'm the greatest real estate agent in my area." And I went from one sale in my first year to in a few years, 100 sales. I broke every record there was. And then I bought the freaking company. Went from farm boy to financially free. I became resourceful. I became capable of doing things I didn't know I was going to do. The most powerful force in the human psyche is how we describe ourselves to ourselves. Who's giving you labels? You're too short, you're too tall, you're quiet, you're introverted. And you take on those labels and you wear them like they're your persona. And then you live into them, like a role that you were given in life. You can rewrite that. You can make it whatever you want. Insert it and then program it. I am. I am. You are what? Gifted, guided, grateful, powerful, passionate, playful, sexy, sensual, sensitive, and blessed. What are you? Today is the first day of the rest of your life, and you get to redefine yourself. So who are you? And who do you want to be? The words that follow I am follow you.
The wisest person I ever met in my life, a third grade dropout. Wisest and dropout in the same sentence is rather oxymoronic, like jumbo shrimp. Like fun run, ain't nothing fun about it. Like Microsoft Works, y'all don't hear me. I used to say like country music, but I've lived in Texas so long, I love country music now. I hunt, I fish, I have cowboy boots and cowboy, y'all, I'm a black neck redneck. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? No longer oxymoronic for me to say country music. And it's not oxymoronic for me to say third grade and dropout. That third grade dropout, the wisest person I ever met in my life, who taught me to combine knowledge and wisdom to make an impact, was my father. A simple cook. Wisest man I ever met in my life. Just a simple cook Left school in the 3rd grade to help out on the family farm, but just because he left school doesn't mean his education stopped. Mark Twain once said, "I've never allowed my schooling to get in the way of my education." My father taught himself how to read, taught himself how to write, decided in the midst of Jim Crowism, as America was breathing the last gasp of the Civil War, my father decided he was going to stand and be a man. Not a black man, not a brown man, not a white man, but a man. He literally challenged himself to be the best that he could all the days of his life. I have 4 degrees. My brother is a judge. We're not the smartest ones in our family. It's a 3rd grade dropout daddy. A 3rd grade dropout daddy who was quoting Michelangelo, saying to us, "Boys, I won't have a problem if you aim high and miss, but I'm gonna have a real issue if you aim low and hit." A country mother quoting Henry Ford, saying, "If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right." I learned that from a 3rd grade drop. Simple lessons. Lessons like these. Son, you'd rather be an hour early than a minute late. We never knew what time it was at my house because the clocks were always ahead. My mother said for nearly 30 years my father left the house at 3:45 in the morning. One day she asked him, "Why, Daddy?" He said, "Maybe one of my boys will catch me in the act of excellence." I want to share 2 things with you. Aristotle said, "You are what you repeatedly do." Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act. Don't ever forget that. I know you're tough, but always remember to be kind. Always. Don't ever forget that. Never embarrass mama. Yeah. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If daddy ain't happy, don't nobody care. But you know, I'm trying to tell you. Next lesson. Lesson from a cook over there in the galley. Son, make sure your servant's towel is bigger than your ego. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Y'all might have a relative in mind you want to send that to. Let me say it again. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Pride is the burden of a foolish person. John Wooden coached basketball at UCLA for a living, but his calling was to impact people. And with all those national championships, guess what he was found doing in the middle of the week? Going into the cupboard, grabbing a broom, and sweeping his own gym floor. You want to make an impact? Find your broom. Every day of your life, you find your broom. You grow your influence that way. That way you're attracting people so that you can impact them. Final lesson. Son, if you're gonna do a job, do it right. I've always been told how average I can be. Always been criticized about being average. But I want to tell you something. I stand here before you, before all of these people, not listening to those words, but telling myself every single day to shoot for the stars, to be the best that I can be. Good enough isn't good enough if it can be better, and better isn't good enough if it can be best. Let me close with a very personal story that I think will bring all this into focus. Wisdom will come to you in the unlikeliest of sources, a lot of times through failure. When you hit rock bottom, remember this. While you're struggling, rock bottom can also be a great foundation on which to build and on which to grow. I'm not worried that you'll be successful. I'm worried that you won't fail from time to time. Person that gets up off the canvas and keeps growing, that's the person that will continue to grow their influence. Back in the 70s, to help me make this point, let me introduce you to someone. I met the finest woman I'd ever met in my life. Back in my day, we'd have called her a brick house. This woman was the finest woman I'd ever seen in my life. There's just one little problem. Back then, ladies didn't like big old linemen. The blind side hadn't come out yet. They like quarterbacks and running backs. We're at this dance, and I find out her name is Trina Williams from Lompoc, California. And we're all dancing, and we're just excited. And I decide in the middle of dancing with her that I would ask her for her phone number. Trina was the first one. Trina was the only woman in college who gave me her real telephone number. The next day, we walked to Baskin & Robbins ice cream parlor. My friends couldn't believe it. This has been 40 years ago, and my friends still can't believe it. We go on a second date, and a third date, and a fourth date. We drive from Chico to Vallejo so that she could meet my parents. My father meets her. My daddy, my hero, he meets her, pulls me to the side and says, "Is she psycho?" But anyway, we go together for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. By now, Trina's a senior in college. I'm still a freshman, but I'm working some things out. I'm so glad I graduated in 4 terms. Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. So now it's time to propose. So I talked to her girlfriends, and it's California, it's in the 70s, so it has to be outside. You have to have a candle, and you have to have, some chocolate. Listen, I'm from the hood. I had a bottle of Boone's Farm wine. That's what I had. She said yes. That was the key. I married the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. Y'all ever been to a wedding, and even before the wedding starts, you hear this? How in the world? And it was coming from my side of the family. We get married, we have a few children, our lives are great. One day, Trina finds a lump in her left breast. Breast cancer. 6 years after that diagnosis, me and my 2 little boys walked up to Mommy's casket. And for 2 years, my heart didn't beat. If it wasn't for my faith in God, I wouldn't be standing here today. If it wasn't for those 2 little boys, there would have been no reason for which to go on. I was completely lost. That was rock bottom. You know what sustained me? The wisdom of a 3rd grade dropout. The wisdom of a simple cook. We're at the casket. I'd never seen my dad cry. But this time I saw my dad cry. That was his daughter. Trina was his daughter, not his daughter-in-law. And I'm right behind my father, about to see her for the last time on this earth. And my father shared 3 words with me that changed my life right there at the casket. It would be the last lesson he would ever teach me. He said, "Son, just stand. You keep standing. You keep standing, no matter how rough the sea, you keep standing." And I'm not talking about just water. You keep standing. No matter what, you don't give up. And as clearly as I'm talking to you today, these were some of her last words to me. She looked me in the eye and she said, "It doesn't matter to me any longer how long I live. What matters to me most is how I live." I ask y'all one question, a question that I was asked all my life by a 3rd grade dropout. How you living? How you living? Every day, ask yourself that question, how you living? Here's what a cook would suggest you to live this way. That you would not judge, that you would show up early, that you'd be kind, that you'd make sure that that servant's towel is huge and used, that if you're gonna do something, you do it the right way. That cook would tell you this, that it's never wrong to do the right thing, that how you do anything is how you do everything. And in that way, you will grow your influence to make an impact. In that way, you will honor all those who have gone before you, who have invested in you. Look in those unlikeliest places for wisdom. Enhance your life every day by seeking that wisdom and asking yourself every night, how am I living? May God richly bless y'all. Thank you for having me.